Let's do a heat check on the Cleveland real estate market in July. Let's talk about if there's a shortage of inventory. Let's talk about duplexes, single-family homes. Let's even talk about condos. Let's talk about point of sale. Let's talk about all of this and more on the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast.
Investing in real estate can be full of pitfalls. Don't end up as another horror story on Mike Reilly's Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. Hi, I'm Mike Ferrante with Century 21 Homestar and the 21 Mike team, serving buyers and sellers all over the state of Ohio. We specialize in helping investors buy and sell real estate, so before you make another move, go to 21mike.com to schedule an appointment. The 21 Mike team, your one-stop shop for buying and selling.
Hi, everybody. It's Mike Reilly on a really nice, pleasant Saturday, July, around 11:30. It's not 115 degrees. It's 70 degrees with a nice, gentle breeze and some rain moving in later in the day. And with me is my fully caffeinated partner, Mike Ferrante from Century 21. Good morning, Mike.
Hey, Mike, great to be here. Already started the morning with a kayak around Ladue Reservoir and ready to talk some real estate.
Wow. Okay. But you haven't given us your caffeinated level yet. So what is that?
One soy cappuccino into the day.
Okay. All right. How much soy, how much coffee is it? What's the ratio on that one?
Yeah, so what I've always heard for the proper cappuccino is it's thirds. 1/3 espresso, 1/3 milk, steamed milk, and 1/3 foam. That's like the ideal cappuccino right there. So people can argue with me, but I'll die on that hill, as they say.
Mike Ferrante, Italian, should know this. Okay. All right. Well, enough of this. Let's get to our favorite show of the month. The fireworks are behind us. You've assembled the scattered data for our July heat check at the halfway point of the year. So, Mike, let's go to the numbers.
Yeah, so I wish I had something shocking and amazing to share with you, but it's pretty much what we expect. We've been talking for couple of years now about inventory shortage, but there's some good news. Like it does every year this time of year, summer is when listings kind of rise. More people list their homes. Kids are out of school. That's when families are making their moves. And in general, of course, if you're familiar with Cleveland, it's easier to move in spring, summer, and fall. No one wants to move in January, right, Mike?
Right.
So your listings hit the market. We're up to over 2,100 listings, which sounds like a lot, but really it isn't. Normally in a balanced market, we're between 4,000 and 6,000 listings, 4,000 and 6,000 homes on the market. So we're literally still hovering at about a third of what we need.
So still a seller's market, right?
Very much so. Now, a lot of people will say, yeah, but isn't higher interest rates, isn't that driving demand down? And I can tell you by looking at these numbers that yes, there's a slight decrease in demand, but the problem is the inventory is still so drastically much lower than what we need to meet the demand that it's still very much a seller's market. So we still sold almost 1,500 homes last month, which is right on par with a balanced market. Your market time, we used to talk about, man, if you could sell your house in 30 days or less, you'd be pretty impressed by that. In fact, the 21 Mike team, I made riders to go on signs that said sold in 30 days or less. And that was a big deal. Right now, our median market time, 12 days to sell a house, which is just crazy. Yeah.
Wow. But we still got that big house on Edge Hill Road. That's what are you into? Like 3 months, 2 months?
Edge Hill, I believe we're just over 30 days because we actually went off market. They had a little glitch over there and they had to go off market for about a week, I think.
Okay.
Let's see. Yeah, Edge Hill's 34 days on market. So, you know, and a big unique home like that, is going to take longer to sell. The more unique the home, and also the higher priced homes
Yeah.
tend to take a little longer. Right now, where we're really hurting for inventory, Mike, is that entry level home. If you got something worth between 80 and 200,000, you're sitting on, I want to say, a gold mine. It's still worth what it's worth, but if you want to sell quickly and have multiple offers, sell your house in that price range right now.
Okay. Now the $1 million question, yeah, Mike Ferrante, wizard at selling, and his, Mike team, but selling at the price the sellers want to sell it at. So address that question.
Yeah. So this is kind of what's going on. We've got sellers who are still riding that wave of the last couple of years, thinking, "Oh, I can pretty much list my home wherever I want." It's
Right.
just a suggestion. The price. Someone actually said that to me yesterday, Mike. The price is just a suggestion, and then you bid from there. Maybe, but there is a limit. I've got this one house. It's a new construction home, and the location is not, like, the guy who built it just didn't build the home in the right place. He picked this area, and he built this $500,000 home, or so he thought. And I told him from day one, I said, "Look, in this location, this house is worth closer to 400 than 500." And just last week, we lowered the price. After starting at 500, we just got to 400,000, and we're starting to get interest. About 3.5 months on market, and it's in Kenston School District. So it's a great school district, but there is a limit to what people will
Yeah.
pay based on what your home is actually worth. So it's not just a blank check right now.
Well, do you think buyers are kind of saying to themselves, listen, I'm not going to overpay if the market tanks? And that's putting downward pressure on home sales pricing?
I don't know that there's a lot of fear right now about the market tanking, but I do think that buyers are licking their wounds from the last couple of years. We've heard so many stories about buyers bending over backwards, not just overpaying. That's part of it. Sure, 10, 20, $50,000 over list price. Heck, in other markets, they're talking hundreds of thousands over list price, but also waiving inspections, doing
Yeah.
these appraisal gaps where they say, "Look,
Right.
we don't care if the house doesn't appraise. We want this house so bad, we'll kick in cash to make up the difference." All of
Yeah.
these terms where they gave up the farm just to win, I think buyers are like saying, "Man, I'm glad that's over. Now there's some competition, but we're not going to bend over backwards, Mr. and Mrs. Seller."
Right. Right. Well, I think one of the big things, the market, not just the real estate, but like the stock market, the Dow, NASDAQ, the S&P, everybody's kind of watching the inflation numbers. So there is a kind of tie-in to what the real estate market is as a harbinger for inflation. So things are cooling down in terms of the frenzy. That's basically what you're saying, right?
Exactly. It's not 20, 30, 50 offers. It's, hey, if we're in multiple offers, I think the last one we had like 6 offers on a house in
Oh,
Lake County, which was a fixer upper. Guess what? Priced at 125,000, right in that range I'm talking about.
okay. I've got one. I'm going to segue into our next subject, but let's just keep going on the numbers. What else?
Well, the other big question people want to know is price. And I was kind of surprised. The previous month, we stayed pretty flat. We've been hovering in the 190s for median home values. And I've been predicting since winter, really, that we would once again get into the 200s. I said low 200s. And last month, the median for residential sales in Northeast Ohio, 225,000. So I haven't had time to
Wow.
really dig into that and figure out, wow, how did we jump $30,000 in median price? But it's certainly an indicator that this summer prices are going to bounce back up to where we would expect them. Prices always rise in the spring, summer, and fall, and they always dip a little bit in winter. It's just simple supply and demand. So 225 is our median right now. And, I like the median because it's not thrown off by a lot of outliers. But just out of curiosity, I ran average price, and average is about $40,000 higher than that. But the trends are all consistent. I looked at averages for days on market, price, all these things. And the trends are perfectly mirrored. So I think what's most important is not getting down to the penny of what the dollars are or down to the day of what the days are. The important thing is that days on market is dropping and prices continue to rise, which is an indicator of a seller's market.
Okay. Let's talk about duplexes. I mean, there is a fascination with investors on duplexes. Any stats, any general thoughts, anecdotal observations, Mike, on duplexes?
Yeah. So that trend is still happening. And if you list a duplex right now, you're going to have investors fighting over it. I think that the perception, and I know this is a hot button for you, Mr. Reilly, but the perception is that, duplexes are such better investments than single families because on paper the cash flow is higher. And I can't argue that fact. On paper, the cash flow is typically higher. But duplexes come with their own separate challenges. I own a duplex, Mike, and it has been a good property for me. It's a long-term hold, and I'm not unhappy with it. But believe me, it comes with its share of problems.
Right, exactly. I think a lot of problems that don't show up in the all these investor analysis on cash flow is the problems you get in certain areas with certain tenants, where there's fights, there's arguments. I mean, we're not talking professional people living here. We're talking, people that are more vagabonds moving around. And that seems to be the biggest horror show that I see happening with some duplex that investors have bought. I mean, it's a real horror show. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think the word that I would use is more transient. So you rent a duplex, you're not typically there for the long haul. Now, again, there's exceptions. My downstairs tenant in my duplex, they've been there like 14 years.
Right.
So that's the exception. But when you have more of a renter / apartment mentality when you're renting a duplex. When you're renting a single family home or you own your home, you have more of an owner mentality where you're nesting, you're improving, you're decorating to suit your taste, you're landscaping, you're planting your flowers, in your fall, you're planting bulbs that you're going to come see in the spring. So it's that longer term mentality, less turnover. And the tenants that you get tend to care for the property more like it's their own.
I think if you get into a duplex, you really should be looking for a professional class of people renting from you, like residents, doctors, traveling nurses, professional, single people, that sort of thing. That they're in their house, but they're not, you don't have two boyfriends coming over fighting over, the tenant, or all of a sudden you get off, you have two people moving in the house. All of a sudden you have 8 living there. And then of course the tenant above or below just goes ballistic. And then the neighbors.
Well, I think a lot of that is driven by location, Mike, so you're up there in Cleveland Heights. And of course, what's near Cleveland Heights? The dental school, the Case Western, the art school. So because you're in that location, I do believe that you tend to attract those types of tenants. And a lot of times they'll sign 2, 3, 4-year leases because they know, hey, I'm in Cleveland for my residency for X number of years, or, to finish up this internship. And then they'll sign those long-term leases. So that's kind of a bonus.
Right. Okay. So anything else on stats before we segue into the next subject?
So while we were talking, I did pull up the trends for both price and market time, and it's a lot less regular than single family homes and condos. We usually talk about residential, but the overall trend is that prices are trending upwards. So right now the median price for multifamily, this is 2s, 3s, and 4s, is just under 130,000. It peaked last summer. It peaked at 100, almost 140. So I think that trend is going to continue. If you go back 5 years, for example, our multifamily median price got down into the 60s. But of course, the thing that, talking about a hot commodity and people wanting them, market time on multifamily is under 20 days. You're looking at about 17 days to sell your typical multifamily.
Okay, now you have a client, our old friend from Dallas, selling his shaker. How's that going?
So he's kind of toiling over a couple things. You have to be careful when you buy in certain cities, Mike, and you can probably talk about this as well. But this fella bought something to Airbnb it, and then
Yeah,
come to find out the city he's in, Shaker Heights, which is one of the stricter cities in the area, decided, hey, no rentals under 30 days. And that's a city
right,
ordinance. And I think that's a whole other podcast. We could talk about,
right,
government restrictions on things of that nature. But the bottom line is, a fellow bought this property with that intent, and now he can't use it for that. So I think
right.
he's navigating that, trying to decide what to do with the vacant units. But I can tell you this much: as soon as that thing hits the market, we're going to have offers on it, as long as he prices it per our recommendations.
Hey, let's stop here. We got to pay some bills. 30 seconds, and we'll be back. If you've been listening to this podcast, then you understand or should understand the pitfalls of investing in Cleveland real estate. Say you're looking for an investment property to rent, and these are the things that could happen and often do. You overpay for a house, and it's in the ghetto. Then you find that it's a money pit with endless surprise repairs. Your hapless property manager, who may be the brother-in-law of the realtor, gets a tenant who after 3 months stops paying the rent. Then the toilet explodes, and you have nobody to repair it because, guess what? The property manager is not answering the phone. Yep, that's the ugly side of the Cleveland real estate market. But we have a solution. Buy one of our properties. It's been inspected. It's been vetted. It's in a rock-solid part of town. It comes with a Gold Star tenant paying top dollar rent, and we manage it. Call us at 216-371-8160 if you're interested.
Okay. One other thing that when it hits the market, I know I've talked to him because he was originally my customer before he was your client. Is this fixation on making it POS compliant? My attitude is, and POS, folks, for people who don't know what I'm talking about, is the city requires you to get point of sale items taken care of before the seller can, get his money and, title transfers. The POS has to be taken care of unless the buyer wants to assume the violations, in which case they have to put money in escrow. But my point has always been, well, put it out there as is, that you will be taking care of the point of sale, and make it a negotiating point if you get a bunch of investors coming in. What's your thoughts?
I think that in this market, it's viable. I know that we talked, we've been doing this for years, Mike, and 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you didn't want to do that because it was more of a buyer's market. And if I had my
Right.
choice of 3 properties that were point of sale compliant, meaning no violations, or one that wasn't, buyers would lean toward the one that wasn't, unless the discount they were getting for assuming the violations was significant enough. I think in this
Right.
market that you can be more aggressive with that sort of strategy. The only pushback I would give you is that in order to have the most competition for a property, we always talk about how can we enlarge the audience? How can we have a bigger target market? And the one way you do that, one of many ways, is by making it point of sale compliant. So you have your investors who will look at these properties, but also there's guys like me. One of the first houses I ever bought was a duplex because I wanted to live in one side and rent out the other and fulfill or at least go on the first step of my dream of being a real estate mogul, right? So I'm living in half of this duplex and renting the other side, and pretty much my payment was covered, and I was putting a few bucks in my pocket.
That's when you were wearing gold, Mike. That's when you had the gold chain and the sports car, and you were the real estate mogul.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
no,
I was. Yeah.
yeah, my point is more that, yeah, you're going to take care of the violations, but there's no rush. If you just told the investor, look, I've got to get a couple contractors, the tenants coming in, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, but I will take care of the violations, right? That's expanding
yeah.
the market.
Yeah. And here's a little fact. This is something that probably even local listeners don't know. The point of sale inspections that are required by the cities that have them, most of those cities, and maybe all of them, I haven't checked the ordinance for each city, but the city ordinance, if you read it, it actually says before you put your property up for sale, you must have a point of sale inspection. Now, they're not out there enforcing that. We just had one of these recently. Another client wanted to put his property up for sale, and he decided, hey, I'm going to wait to get my point of sale inspection until I see how much interest there is in the property. And that can be a slippery slope. We can go more into that, but the bottom line is that you're kind of hoping that the violations aren't too bad once you get that inspection, because it could blow up the deal that you have on the table.
Well, no. I would get the point of sale in hand, so you know what you have to do. I'm just saying, in terms of dealing with, the market of getting a contractor out to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, everybody's backed up. I'm saying, hey, I'll take care of it, but you put it on the market, and then you just see if there's any kind of bidding war that erupts on this house, where they may assume the violations. That's all.
Right. I agree 100%.
Okay, so all right, now let's segue from that into a topic I wanted to talk about, which is a company/organization that I am forming that's called RATH. Wrath. Feel the wrath. It's not W, although wrath should be spelled WRATH. But I came up with this as a play on MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. That's also spelled incorrectly, MADD. RATH stands for Residents Against Terrible Housing. Okay? Have I talked to you about that?
Yeah, you mentioned it. I thought it was interesting.
Okay. Now, you said to me that if you had a starter home, 3-bedroom, under 100,000 or 100 and between 100 and 200, or a real nice fixed up house. Well, I have a bunch of properties that we manage and own, where we invariably in Cleveland Heights have houses that have been vacant for a couple of years. It's driving the neighbors crazy. The city seems to be either A, disinterested, or B, just doesn't know what to do with it. And these houses are just sitting there. And I'm thinking to myself, let's get an organization together where we recruit the neighbors who have to live next to this house, take it to court as a group for each individual house, and take it to court on a nuisance abatement for like $10,000, because nobody's going to show up to contest it. You win the judgment, and then you foreclose on the house. And if the county is giving you problems, which sometimes they do because they have all these back taxes that they've been cluelessly piling on for the last 2, 3, 4 years, you go to the city, you go to the county, and you make some noise, and you make them give it up instead of taking 4, 5, 6 years to go to the land bank. So wrath is designed to put the heat on the city and the courts to turn around these houses and get them to an investor who will fix it up and sell. Now, in Cleveland Heights alone, there are 500 of these houses. I mean, think about it. 500 vacant houses, overgrown lawns, and a lot of them are north of Mayfield. Your thoughts, Mike?
Well, I think what you're doing is, if nothing else, going to shake the tree. You know, if you own one of these houses right now, nobody's knocking on your door, nobody's hassling you. And, you know, you can just sit there and let it ride. But I think if
Right.
someone starts hassling you, you have to do something. We've talked about the city of Cleveland Heights for years, and I don't know, like you said, if it's just apathy or lack of direction or lack of leadership, but they just seem overwhelmed, and a lot of these cities can't or won't do anything about them. So, you know, I don't. Someone needs to do something, and obviously, if leadership in the city isn't going to do it, someone needs to step up.
Well, I think look at I, my own take on growing up in Cleveland Heights and knowing the good people in who work in the city. We're very close to a lot of people in the housing department. I think they're just overwhelmed. But I think the people that are on council, the people, the mayor, a lot of these people, I think this is such a conundrum what to do with these vacant houses that they just don't even want to give it any thought. I mean, they had millions of dollars that was given to Cleveland Heights by the Biden administration through the ARPA funds. You know what the ARPA funds are?
No, I don't.
That was the emergency rescue money that passed over a year ago, that sent money to cities to help them, fix this, fix that. And it's called ARPA. Well, the city got, I don't know, 150 million or 100 million, something like that. It was unbelievable how much they did. Not $1 was spent on housing. They used it to, fix the water issues, to fix this, to fix that. Not one thing was done towards vacant housing. Meanwhile, you've got 500 homes vacant for years. Think about the lost tax revenues. And this is where I think the problem in a lot of city governments is you have people who are there who maybe came from nonprofit. They have a nonprofit mentality. They're not entrepreneurs. They're not thinking about, different angles here, because RAF should be something that pays for itself. Meaning you have a law firm on retainer. You have somebody who's going around identifying the houses and then calling the neighbors, getting them on board. And when you get that $10,000 per judgment, that's going to be the bulk of that money is being used to initiate the lawsuit and then be collecting and foreclosing. I mean, do you have any thoughts or insights in how you foreclose on a lien?
Well, it's no different than any other foreclosure. And anyone who knows a little bit about, let's just say, for example, homeowners associations. Did you know that a homeowners association, I know you do, Mike, but most people, did you know that a homeowners association can actually foreclose on a property? And it can be for something as simple as not paying your HOA fees. But as you probably know, the HOA can perform work on the house, like nuisance work. And I know you've done this in the past. And it's a foreclosure no different than if someone didn't pay their mortgage. Now, I think you've looked into the costs of foreclosures, and I think depending on whether or not the other party resists, hires their own counsel, but I think it's somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 typically to do a foreclosure action. Does that sound about right?
Right, yeah. But I think a lot of times what happens with some of these situations is you have the county that's been piling on taxes that haven't been paid in years. So all of a sudden you have a house in its current state that's probably worth $50,000 because you have to put $100,000 in just to clean it out, and the county has piled on property back taxes of over $50,000 over 5, 6, 7 years. And so now it's, who's going to buy the house and assume those back taxes, knowing they're going to have to put money into it? And that's how they came up with the land bank. The land bank was, okay, fine. The county will let this house go and forgive the taxes, and it'll go to the land bank, and the land bank will, fix it up. and then sell it. And the land bank's done a great job. The problem is they're not doing it in volume. That's the problem. I mean, it takes years for these houses to get to the land bank. Meanwhile, you're not collecting taxes, and everybody who's got to live around this rat-infested dump, their property values have gone down. So I think that connecting the dot to the fact that there is demand for these 3-bedroom starter homes, and there's so many of these 3 bedrooms out there that are just sitting there vacant. You know, I'm just sensing there is an opportunity here to put it on a for-profit basis, and then tie investors who are listening to this podcast, contact us through ReillyProperties.com or Century 21 Mike Team. We'll give you the taglines. But I think this could be a way of putting in a fresh look for profit to go after, a couple hundred vacant homes. So I'm thinking out of the box, as I always do, try to do, and but it's got to pay for itself. Final thoughts, Mike? Because we'll do a podcast on this, and also Airbnb later
Mike,
this month.
My final thought here is that if you solve that riddle, you will be solving the riddle that every investor, every wholesaler, they all want, and that is, how do I get my hands on more properties, and how do I find off-market properties? Because as we just said with Heat Check, there's not enough properties on the market. So where can we find more inventory? And when you solve this one, it's going to be newsworthy.
Okay, well, let's pick this up in our next podcast next week. We'll touch on Airbnb, what the company is doing. We'll maybe get I'll get somebody incognito. We won't identify him from the city. We'll have his voice masked or something, and they can talk about what they deal with, so they won't get into trouble. But that'll be coming up on our next issue. All right, Mike?
Sounds good, Mike.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy Heat Check, and we'll have something to you in the next week. Okay. All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast with Mike Reilly. Please add our show or follow us on Spotify, Overcast, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. Leave a like or comment on the video. All engagement is appreciated. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well for video content coming soon. For any Cleveland listeners or Cleveland Browns fans, you can check out our other podcast, Cleveland Browns Anonymous, for our weekly group therapy session. This is also on all the same platforms as the Cleveland Real Estate Investor.